Welcome to our series of programs on unlocking the Indian economy and putting it on the path of economic revival. In this episode, we are going to be looking specifically at unlocking supply. And in a very specific way, we are going to highlight the importance of the reform agenda of the government and how it has unleashed the potential of the economy and the animal spirits, in a sense, of industry to be able to raise its game and start producing more goods and services, even under the time of crisis. Taking us through the discussion, we have two very eminent guests. Let me introduce you to them. I've done two one-on-one special interviews with each of them. They are Dr. Arvind Virmani is the president of the Forum for Strategic Initiative and the chairman of the Foundation for Economic Growth. He's been a former chief economic advisor to the Ministry of Finance and a former executive director of the International Monetary Fund. Vidisha Ganguly is the chief economist at the industry body CII. CII, as we know, is a key industry body and it tracks every aspect and every sector of the Indian economy very closely. It also works very closely with government on business policy and also lobbies for business to create a better business environment. So let's begin. We know that COVID has created a huge shock. It's been a huge shock. There are headwinds that are going to persist for some period of time. But the government has been providing support through policy, and we can see there are some tailwinds from there as far as we are concerned. And there's sustained reforms that are taking place. So far, this package, the Atmanirbhar Bharat package, is like 20 lakh crore rupees, was announced from May onwards. We've been seeing a series of reforms. To what extent, is this helping across sectors?
So reforms typically would have an impact in the medium to long term. They would not have an immediate impact. Of course, very significant reforms have been announced. For example, in the agricultural sector, farmers are now free to sell their products anywhere. However,
Yes.
The implementation will take time. It is also up to states to implement it. So it is not as simple as giving a demand stimulus. Supply side reforms will take a longer time to actually start having an impact on the ground. But of course, also the government has been trying to get investment. So in different sectors like consumer durables or electronics. There are a lot of measures that have been taken to actually get investment on the ground. This, of course, has a huge, very good impact. It creates jobs, and that has an impact in the immediate term. They've also outlined land that
Yes.
has been created for getting investment. So these are
Right.
good measures.
So basically, what the lockdown and the pandemic did, it disrupted logistic chains and it fragmented markets geographically and product wise. So you can have the strange phenomena of having a excess supply demand in one area and the opposite in a neighboring area or an area 20 miles away. So this fragmentation of markets is very important to keep in mind when devising policies. So basically what you have is three phases. You had the disruption, you have the transition and normalization. Now, during the transition and the normalization phase, it was important to inject money in a way that bankruptcies don't happen, people don't starve, etc. But as we get closer to normalization and future, the government's attention has turned to policy reforms, which will help stimulate the economy, next year or by the end of this year, and generate self-sustaining growth and employment growth. So in that sense, the fiscal monetary part of it and the reforms will become more and more complementary as we proceed with normalization, and are both very important.
If we look at the way the government has been prioritizing things, because it started out with food supply, checking the food supply, seeing that everyone has enough. Food security was key. Then after all, because it was a pandemic, healthcare was crucial. And of course, ramping up the healthcare system, which it did with giving due measure to that. Since the MSME segment was badly hurt, there was a lot of, there was a package to boost the MSMEs. So it has been, an approach like that. So how do you see this particular scheme that has now been announced, which is a few months ago? It was announced for street vendors, the Swanidhi scheme, and within a few weeks of the scheme, 130 crores was dispersed for street vendors. And I'm bringing this into the supply side because at the end of the day, they are suppliers, they are sellers.
So what the government has tried to do, nothing is perfect, but we had put out a paper in May from EGROW Foundation, and it is remarkable how, not exactly, but closely the government's programs of focusing on different things kind of mirrors that. I'm sure they also thought through the same things, but this is what we from economic grounds had suggested also. So in that sense, it's very, very hopeful for the country. Now, coming to the vendors, let me very briefly talk about what we know about employment, unemployment. So we basically have three categories, which were affected. And in April, May, June, the unemployment rate went up tremendously, but then fell rapidly to the extent that the latest September data shows we are even better off than we were a year ago. So in that sense, there is recovery, but it's important to look at the three categories. The three categories are the self-employed, the casual labor, and the regular labor. Now, it turns out that casual labor, which is where these schemes which you just mentioned are designed, because, not casual labor, self-employed. Right?
Yes.
So that is a very important segment from a social welfare perspective, and also the foundation of the economy. So in that sense, that is already in a sense having an effect, because that data for August, September shows that most of the reduction in what we call labor force participation rate. Remember, it may be not clear, but the unemployment rate has gone down and gone back to normal, but people have withdrawn. Some people have withdrawn from the labor force by about 2% points, which is called the LFPR. So you have to keep both in mind. So what LFPR shows is the problem is not in the casual labor or the self-employed, but in the regular employees. So this means, it would suggest to me, though there's no direct proof, that these kind of schemes which have been directed at promoting the self-employment, getting people back on the feet are working. That would be the implication.
Economists tend to think of supply side changes as more kind of the reforms that you spoke about.
Yes.
There are many that the government has implemented on land, on labor. Another very important thing that the government talked about is the housing for workers. We saw after the lockdown that many of the migrants had to walk back because they did not have housing where they were working. So if this housing scheme works out over the medium to long term, it would be a very good thing for workers to stay in the place or close to the place of their work. So these are also very significant reforms that will play out over a period of time.
Indeed. And specifically about the Swanidhi scheme, what would you think? Street vendors and the priority towards them, because the importance is that, this was a sector that was badly hit. People were not really going to buy anything and they were basically trying to sell their wares. But now we find that, they're picking up quite a lot and they have the access to money as well in terms of government support.
Yes, certainly it is a very good measure. But I think people will still have the fear of going out and buying things. Even once the government allows everything to operate, there is still a fear factor which will affect their viability.
Let's take agricultural reforms as well now. The key agricultural reforms recently passed by Parliament, they are basically to help create markets which, are across the country. The farmer can sell across the country. It also helps contract farming. The buyer can, in a sense, also look for products from across the country. What do you think? How will this help in sort of streamlining supply in the agriculture sector?
Right. This is a very important, critical reform which some of us have been talking about for decades. In fact, we have a paper, I have a paper with another co-author, which I did in the Planning Commission, which is dated 2001. That's 19 years ago, okay? Where we analyze some of the problems with the agricultural sector. So yes, it is absolutely, I mean, I have actually in my tweets called it revolutionary in that sense, that this is a 30-year-old problem. It's taken 20 years to address, but okay, good, very good that it's finally happened. In that sense, it's revolutionary. So what is it doing? All it is doing is provide a competitive environment for the output of farmers. Nothing else is changing, well, except the contract, which I'll come back to. But in terms of the markets, what it's doing is freeing up the farmers. You know, there is this silly, stupid assumption that farmers are like children who cannot think about their own good. They can decide. The existing mandis are still there. Nobody has abolished them. If they still want to go to that, if they think that's a better thing, sure, they can go. But what this provides is an alternative channels which will develop over time. They are not instantly there, but the government has constrained them for 40 years. Now, within 3 to 5 years, you will see new markets developing for new products. The future is the new products. The old economy of wheat, rice, sugar is finished. It is not what is going to give incomes to farmers. It's not going to give productivity which is needed. Agricultural productivity has been stuck at 50% of global average for 50 years. So in that sense, yes, it is absolute essential step. There are other things which are being done, including the Contract Labor Act, the Agricultural Contracts Act, which is another channel. It is again not something we are saying that will be substitute either the mandis or the new marketing channel. This is a third channel. Again, the farmer can decide, does he want to have a contract with a long-term? Why is contract necessary? Because for developing markets for new products, okay? If you want to market products which don't exist, you know, new products, then the person who's developing the market needs a assured supply. So this is a third channel which is being opened, and I'm sure within 5 years or so you will see the transformation that it brings about.
You know, earlier the farmer had only one person to sell to, and they could impose a lot of taxes and other things which was being paid. Of course, the mandis were also spending some of that money on creating infrastructure. However, now that there is an option, you know, there are different buyers who can actually give guidance to the farmer as to what to plant and how to what we call the services that you can provide to the farmer to guide him towards creating the product that the buyer wants. So it will be very effective in the fruits and vegetable space, and I think it's a huge reform.
So you think the market is taking over in a sense that, it's basically going to be driven by demand and supply and not really by, the old-fashioned system of, producing basically to sell at MSP?
So the MSP will still be there. There is that system will continue, but it's just that the seller has a choice of buyers. In any other good or service, nobody is restricted to selling to one seller. They have an option and once there is competition among buyers, that will also have an impact on the price. The price of food will, over the long term, will moderate, because if one seller is willing to buy at a particular price, you don't have to sell to that.
If we talk about the other reforms, like the new education policy, also there are labor reforms, skill development focus. All these look to enhance manpower resources in a sense, and make them more employable, and also make us more competitive in terms of the output of manpower. How do you look at this affecting the economy on the supply side, both from the services as well as, getting us higher grade products?
Right. So that I would say is the second or third revolutionary reform. Again, something which we have talked about and discussed, this one for even longer, 30 years. But let me not repeat that kind of thing. But yes, definitely. the simplification of 44 odd laws into 4 labor codes, some of the flexibility that has been introduced, absolutely. The thing we missed out completely was this labor-intensive exports and labor-intensive production. And though I don't want to make a big deal about this Bangladesh news which has come out, but 30 years ago, we were pointing that Bangladesh has much more flexible labor laws than ours, and they will do much better on labor-intensive exports, etc., which has exactly happened. That's exactly what has happened, what we had said, we had analyzed. So again, better late than never. I think it's a great reform. People have hesitated, but once it begins to work through the system, this along with the education policy, which you mentioned, absolutely complementary, and the skill development, where there is a little gap left in terms of training. Yes, there's some minor portion of the Apprenticeship Act which need to be changed, because we need to have people on the job training. Education and imparting skills is not the full story. In manufacturing, you also need on the job training. So with some other little tweaks which are still needed, I think this is a great reform.
So there will be a lot of change in the post-pandemic workplace. Nobody really knows what it will look like. You might need new set of skills, new kind of like work from home will become much more prevalent. So it is very important to have flexibility in the labor system. So one of the changes that has been made is to allow flexible workers' employment, which is what we till today we call the contract labor, but now we can have flexible arrangements with the employee, and they will still get full benefits that a full-time employee gets, but their contract can be terminated at any time. So this is a very useful thing in the new normal that will emerge post the pandemic. Similar, I think labor reforms will certainly have a good impact, because we don't know what the workplace will look like. A lot more machine learning and AI will be used in the new world, and therefore the skills for these things have to be prevalent, and skill training has to be given in this new kind of situation.
Also, with terms of branding, I mean, we talk, all this is really under the banner of Atmanirbhar Bharat. And that is basically to boost local manufacturing. We've seen under the lockdown, we had to be self-reliant, and we sort of proved ourselves in terms of, supplying things which were necessary as per the demand. But it not only boosting local manufacturing, it's also giving it a national pride element, which makes Indian brands globally competitive.
Yeah. Yes, in certain things, it's a complement of confidence to do certain things, but the confidence can only be sustained if the policy structure is right. So both of those things are in a way necessary. We have to have the confidence, we have to have the pride in India, both from the demand and the supply side, and also the policy environment. So we've talked a little bit about the policy environment already.
Yes.
I just mentioned one more thing, which I have been recommending, which is kind of getting there, but is not complete, is what I call a dualistic trade policy. If we think of supply chains, we are talking about things like the supply chain resiliency initiative globally, the PLI initiative of India, where you provide focused subsidies. We are talking about temporary protection. That is the right way to think about it. Permanent protection never works, but very carefully targeted temporary protection, let's say for 3 to 5 years, while the plants of economic scale are built, can be justified if we are very careful. So given some of those things, I think again the direction is right, but one has to be very careful. As some people have pointed out, that just general raising of tariffs, for example, if you raise the tariffs on imports, your production becomes more uncompetitive. And if you do that for export products, which has unfortunately happened in 1 or 2 cases, you have to be very careful. That can actually have the reverse effect. So as long as we are very careful and targeted in the policy framework for Atmanirbhar, I think you're right that along with this national pride, etc., it can produce good results for the next 5 years or so.
Okay, the Atmanirbhar Bharat, it's boosting local manufacturing.
Yes.
And there's also a certain national pride element attached to it. Do you see this mission, helping us to reinvent ourselves, in terms of our supply chain, and basically trying to not ape anybody, but trying to create, or let's say, develop our products for a global market with an Indian brand?
So that is the objective, and certainly
Yes.
a very good objective. So India needs to increase its exports over the next few years, and because the domestic market is no longer enough. India's current share in the global export market is very small compared to all the other Asian countries, and that needs to go up for India to move up the value chain. And India also needs to integrate into the global value chain in different products. And this is why Indian businesses need to improve their productivity. And this links back to the first discussion that we had about infrastructure. Without better infrastructure, Indian businesses cannot have better productivity. It cannot compete with many of our neighbors and other competitors that we have. So yes, this vision is certainly a very, very laudable vision, and we should have that. But we need to enable it through things like having better infrastructure, better labor, better land. Despite having the such a large labor force, a lot of it is not skilled to be able to manufacture products or services which will cater to a global demand. So all these reforms are extremely important in that context.
But the pandemic has really hit the hospitality industry, also civil aviation, airlines, travel. What do you think can be done to, improve the supply side here? Also, in terms of, can it reinvent itself, or should we just wait for a vaccine?
So this is a very special sector. Again, in our research, what we had shown is that there are three sets of sub-aggregates or industries. One was, of course, the essential commodities we discussed in the beginning. Second was manufacturing, mining and construction, where we discussed in the context of the stimulus to capital, etc. And third is this, what we call contact services, where by their very nature, we come into contact with a lot of people, where the pandemic is going to have a much more longer term effect. So you're absolutely right. We need to think more carefully about this segment separately from all the others. So what's the key here? I think the key here is protocols for security of transmission. We already know. I think I think we were a little slow earlier in communicating to the public, but now we are doing that. There are only three things the public must do. One is hand washing, mask, distancing, and then complementing with the government the kind of quarantine. Even if it is self-quarantine, we find that self-quarantine has not worked in certain places because close family members get it, because they don't follow these other three things. Okay. So the protocols, the new information which shows that there's much more safety externally, out in the open air where there's fresh air. So you have to develop these protocols. If you are going to, for example, open cinemas, if you are going to be going through airports and in planes, you have to have clean air inside those areas, okay? Because otherwise the virus spreads. So the protocols are key. Otherwise people are not going to take the chances. And across the world now we are beginning to see certain effective protocols. So I think some focus has to be both the industry and government to get together and define these protocols and implement them to give confidence to the people to come back and buy or participate in these sectors. Otherwise it won't work.
That's absolutely right, that the services sector is seeing a greater impact than the goods as such, which are slowly coming back. Services like hospitality, civil aviation, I think a lot of effort is being made to develop a very safe and an environment that can be trusted. Even for restaurants, hospitality, the companies will have to invest a bit in safety, but I think the consumers can be convinced that traveling or going to a hotel will not compromise their health. I think this is a good time to revive domestic tourism, which had been affected because of the very competitive rates offered in various other countries. But I think for a while people will prefer to travel within the country, and it's a good time for this industry to really develop a better brand image and invest in safety and hygiene. So I think slowly these things will come back.
So would you see then that because testing is improved, I mean, if we can produce a test which gives you a result almost immediately, as people are predicting is going to happen within a short span of time. So in that context, you can create certain areas which are zones which are free of any infection, and people can enter them because they are free of infection and live their lives normally. Maybe planes or maybe restaurants, maybe cinema halls. So you think that's going to happen?
Excellent point. Excellent point. Yeah. That is another protocol. It fits exactly in the context of what I am saying. So some of these other testing protocols, some ultraviolet filtration, etc., which large companies, at least the airplanes, the airports, can implement. And these smaller things where, like you said, the test, if there's a cheap and quick test, that if you test all your employees and consumers every time they enter this hall, yes, it will hugely increase safety, it will reduce the fears, and then these things can revive very, very rapidly. Absolutely correct.
And with that, we conclude our second episode on unlocking supply. I'd like to thank our guests, Dr. Arvind Veermani and Vidisha Ganguly.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure.
And thank you very much for watching.